basically killed my child. If they don't have the human rights or the needs to take care of those men in there, just let them go before they gotta come home. Dad, it's not right. It's not right.
Imagine ending up in prison for a petty crime and getting killed by your fellow inmates, or worse, the prison itself. There's prisons where beatings, torture, and murder are normalized. Some prisons are so bad their inmates would rather go for the death penalty just to make it stop. Let's explore 8 of the world's toughest prisons. Number 1. The Black Dolphin Prison. The Black Dolphin Prison in Russia is quite literally a hellhole. It's even feared by Russian inmates who are used to the extremely harsh prisons in the country. Located near the border of Kazakhstan, this facility hosts the country's most violent and brutal criminals, including pedophiles, terrorists, serial killers, and cannibals. Yes, you heard that right, cannibals. Approximately 700 convicts live in this prison, who have killed almost 4,000 people combined. Imagine that. And the only way to leave the Black Dolphin is in a coffin. Everyone in this prison is serving a life sentence.
In this cell, a man who raped 44 minors and killed 5 children aged 7 to 11.
So it's really no wonder that these prisoners are watched 24/7 via video surveillance, and that guards make rounds every 15 minutes to make sure everything is okay. 2 inmates share a small 50-square-foot cell that is behind 3 sets of metal doors to keep them extra isolated.
The most important thing is to avoid becoming embittered. It is so easy to turn into an animal here, but staying human, that's harder. That's why we try, both with each other and with the administration, to stay human.
On the prisoner's cell door stands their name, picture, and conviction. This way, the officer's sympathy is reduced to 0, time and time again. There's no real relationship between the guards and the inmates. Prisoners are allowed outside for around 90 minutes to exercise in a barren exercise yard. When they're moved anywhere in the prison, they are blinded and bent over so that they can't learn any of the routes or get into fights with fellow inmates or guards. The administration has to be on high alert at all times to make sure things don't get out of control, because these prisoners here are capable of anything. Thanks to this inhumane treatment, many of the world's most hardened criminals learn to regret their deeds.
Everything is lost. The years go by, your health worsens, everything passes by. I think there are few people left in here who think they did the right thing. The years show you that you were wrong, totally wrong. You can't do that.
It's a questionable rehabilitation technique. After one ex-Black Dolphin inmate committed a murder on the very train taking him home after his release, the prison isn't too keen on releasing its prisoners, ever. So even if the inmates beg for the death penalty, that's not an option. They will live their entire bitter lives inside the Black Dolphin. Number 2. Ciudad Barrios Prison. Some prisons are tough because of their harsh conditions or the corrupt, violent guards. The Ciudad Barrios Prison in El Salvador is tough because of its inmates. In 2004 and 2015, it housed exclusively MS-13 gang members. Today, it also houses members from the Barrio 18 gang. This doesn't make it any less safe. In fact, things got worse, as these 2 gangs are in an all-out war. And if an inmate who isn't a gang member arrives, he is almost always killed by another prisoner. Alternatively, gang members kill each other in an endless tit-for-tat that started outside the Ciudad Barrios prison. The 2 gangs are separated within the prison, but every now and then they get to each other, and all hell breaks loose.
Que el diablo ha venido a meterle lo que es a la mente de los humanos, ¿verdad? Pienso yo que podría haber un diálogo, pienso yo.
Finally, whoever doesn't get killed by inmates is very likely to die in the prison's inhumane conditions. With people cramped in tiny cells in extreme heat with very little food and water, many succumb to illnesses or even starvation. This is not a life. Most inmates end up regretting their crimes deeply, simply because they know they will pay forever for them. And inmates can't choose the death sentence here. This is life in prison, with a chance of death by infection or starvation. Number 3. Pettic Island Prison. Yep, Russia has more than just one inhumane prison. The Pettic Island Prison in Vologda is known as the Russian Alcatraz, and it hosts some of the country's most dangerous criminals. And much like the case of the Black Dolphin, there is no hope for release or even a death sentence. It's life in prison, if you can call that a life. Aside from the mental torture of 22.5-hour-a-day lockdowns in 2-man rooms, most prisoners are allowed just 2 visitors per year, and that's all the inmates can ever hope for, as the prison itself is hopelessly inescapable, surrounded by freezing waters of White Lake. According to psychologist Svetlana Kiselyova, there is 0 rehabilitation at this prison. It's just psychological torture and the certainty of madness within a few years. The place destroys people. The first 9 months or so, they spend adapting. After 3 or 4 years, their personalities begin to deteriorate. There is no way anyone can spend 25 years in a place like this without being psychologically destroyed. Inmates are shoved into tiny cells where they spend most of their time alone. The hour and a half they get to spend outside their cells happens in a small outdoor cage, just big enough to pace back and forth in. There are no toilets or bathrooms. Food can barely be called food. And if the prisoner doesn't follow the rules, even in a small way, they are locked in a small dark room for 15 days with a metal bucket and a wooden perch to sit on. In other countries, this would be considered torture. Because of the impossible conditions, half of the Pettic Island prison inmates have tuberculosis. It's safe to say all the Pettic inmates would choose the death sentence over this, but sadly, they can't. Number 4. Bangkok Prison. You can't talk about horrifying prisons without talking about the notorious Bangkok Central Prison in Bangkok, Thailand. Built between 1927 and 1931, this famous prison in Thailand has been jokingly referred to as the Bangkok Hilton. It's a pretty obvious hint at the severe lack of comfort or order in this prison. But discomfort is an understatement here. According to the International Federation for Human Rights, the Bangkok Hilton shows just about every human rights violation there is. Whatever crime you commit, you're thrown inside an overpacked cell with some of the most dangerous criminals in the world, including those who have been sentenced to death. Locals also call it the Big Tiger because it eats men alive.
I have no clue when I will die. They could inject me today or tomorrow.
And if the Big Tiger doesn't kill you with lethal injection, it can kill you with disease. The Bangkok Hilton is operating at 224% capacity. Overcrowding is an understatement. Prisoners spend 15 hours a day in their tiny cells, constantly touching each other, even when they sleep on the cold concrete floor.
You literally cannot lie flat on your back. Put your hands on your stomach. If you do that, your elbows are on two other beds. That's pretty damn close, and that's 15 hours a day.
Another inmate said, "I was sleeping on the hard floor with a water bottle as my pillow. It was just soul-destroying." It's easy to imagine how fast disease can spread there. And if you get hurt, it might take hours, sometimes days, until the doctor can look at the injury, so that can get infected too. Many Bangkok prisoners end up taking their own life. If they can't get the death sentence, they deliver one to themselves when it all becomes too much. And it gets even grimmer. An ex-inmate remembers sharing his cell with a dead body for days. The cell floor resembled a mass grave, with arms and legs all over each other. The smell of human feces was so strong I wanted to vomit. I saw a motionless body on a damp and stained mattress, insects hovering over him. My God, I thought. When I dared to look again, my worst thoughts were confirmed. He was really dead. The list of human rights violation goes on. All inmates used to be forced to wear leg irons during the first 3 months of their sentence, which was obviously incredibly uncomfortable for them in every way. Even those who were sentenced to death had to wear these leg irons until they were finally executed. While the use of shackles was officially discontinued in 2013, it's believed that some of the most threatening criminals are still forced to walk around in chains. Like most prisons, the Bangkok Hilton also has a class system, and yes, that applies to the most basic necessities, such as food as well. Those higher up receive more facilities and supplies compared to the ones who are deemed to be of lower class. There are also reports of corruption and smuggling involved, as many of the richer inmates are able to get drugs, alcohol, and whatever else they may desire. And anyone who dares to go against them receives a good beating or a knife in the back. And here's a final twist. Inmates are forced into free labor, and the officers torture them if they don't meet the inhumane quotas. It was 2 p.m. one day and I wasn't able to finish the nets in time, so I was forced to lie down in the sun and roll over in the dirt. Thai inmates are forced into making fish nets that the prison sells for export. The Bangkok Hilton makes money, but the inmates rarely do. And if they get paid, it's about 3 baht for a day's work instead of the minimum wage of 330 baht. They work until their fingers start to bleed, afraid of what would happen if they didn't finish the huge number demanded by the guards. Our fingers would be all sore with wounds. It's real torture. It's the worst type of work. In the Bangkok Hilton, there are more inmates with severe mental health issues than inmates without any.
There is a lot of people who's losing their minds. Well, I'm sleeping next to a guy now. He just walks around all day, walks around talking to his cell. I'm in the room next to him at night and I've seen a dog scratch less. Last night, he were itching that much, there must have been about 3 different places where he were bleeding from, and he actually got blood on my bed.
1 in 10 inmates is suicidal, so those who receive a death sentence at the Bangkok Hilton consider themselves lucky. Number 5. Gladani Central Prison. The Gladani Prison in Rwanda is simply terrifying in all the ways you can imagine. It's considered the world's most inhumane prison. Remember the overcrowded cells of Bangkok Prison? Well, the Gladani Prison was built to house 600 inmates. Today, it houses from 6,000 to 8,000. Imagine what happens when you put violent individuals together in a small space where they have to breathe down each other's necks. That's right. Gitarama is one of the deadliest prisons in the world, and the inmates who are alive go through unspeakable torture every single day. For starters, the prison is so overcrowded that they rarely have room to sit down or lie down. This means no sleep, no clean air, and easy access to contracting every disease around.
C'est possible à dormir ici. Vraiment, c'est un problème pour trouver où passer la nuit. Parce que les gens, certains gens passent la nuit debout. D'autres, ils prennent la position assise comme ceux que vous voyez ici. Et il y en a qui sont parvenus à trouver une place dans ces bâtiments-ci. Mais eux aussi, ils sont concentrés, ils sont entassés dans un même point.
Most of the time, there's no food either, so there have been several reports of cannibalism within the prison. This isn't even psychopathic murder, it's just a fight to survive. 8 Gitarama inmates die every day, and the smell can be felt from a mile away.
It's almost impossible to convey what it's like down here. The camera doesn't show smell, the camera doesn't show heat. There are, I don't know, maybe 500 people in this little tiny room. Over there are lavatories, perhaps 2 of them, and I'm told there's 2 more upstairs. That's for 8,000 people. There's coughing, there's sickness, there's people with their feet festering.
The question remains, why does such a place even exist? The Gitarama prison became severely overcrowded after the 1994 Rwanda genocide. More than 500,000 Tutsi people were butchered by the Hulu-led government. But almost 3 decades have passed since then, and the Gitarama prison in Rwanda remains a place filled with torture, death, disease, and cannibalism, even as the United Nations and other human rights organizations fight for its closure. When death comes for the Gitarama inmates, it's mercy. Most of these people would happily choose the death penalty in a clean prison with spacious cells and a toilet over a life sentence or even a few years at the Gitarama. Number 6. Gladani Prison. Few prisons are as inhumane and unconstitutional as the Gladani Prison in Tbilisi, Georgia. It was once rated the world's 4th most dangerous prison, and this time, it's all thanks to the guards. In 2012, horrifying videos emerged showing Gladani prison guards torturing inmates for sport. Others were even violated over and over again. An ex-inmate recalls, "They were beating me. They were insulting me. During torture, they drowned me in a bucket full of water and threatened me with rape." Another said, "They tore my fingernails, damaged my skull, broke my leg bones, ribs, nose, and teeth. I'm 43 years old, but I look like an old man. I often fall down while I'm walking." After the videos were leaked, the United Nations got involved. Over the course of a few years, the prison population was cut in half and many of the corrupt psychopathic guards were fired and punished for their actions. UN reporter Juan Mendez said, "Through numerous testimonies, I found convincing evidence that the use of corporal punishment and forced confessions have been effectively abolished. Georgian inmates might see the light at the end of their tunnel, but other inmates across the globe are not so lucky." Number 7. Mendoza Prison. The Mendoza Prison in Argentina is a place so terrible that many of the people imprisoned have gone so far as to sew their mouths shut in demand of better living conditions. It's severely overcrowded, and an average of 5 inmates are crowded into tiny cells that measure only 43 square feet. Many of them are also forced to sleep on the floor without any mattresses, pillows, or blankets. Apart from that, there are barely any toilets, and the few that are present are unbelievably dirty and unhygienic. It's safer to go elsewhere. As a result, the inmates are resorted to using plastic bags and bottles as their washroom due to the lack of proper sewage system. Many of the prisoners suffer from viral conditions, as well as musculoskeletal disorders, and of course, there's little to no professional help available. Reportedly, medical staff is only called once an inmate has passed away, and by the time the staff arrives, inmates might have to spend a day or 2 sleeping next to a rotting corpse. The guards make sure they always have full control over the inmates, and they'll often use torture to exert their dominance. If someone crosses them over, they won't hesitate to execute them and then blame it on another inmate. There's zero justice inside the Mendoza prison. In case of a prison riot, the administration simply imposed cell lockdown that may last from weeks to months. Even the guards refuse to enter some of the more dangerous pavilions, instead leaving the meals of the inmates on an agreed spot some distance from the interior. It's a kill or be killed world, and many inmates die from fights, infections, or starvation. The problem is, this is the fate for any criminal, from a petty thief to a psychopathic serial killer.
El sistema penitenciario en Latinoamérica es conocido por su mal estado. Hacinamiento, violación a los derechos humanos, corrupción.
Number 8. Camp 22. If you thought this list was tough so far, wait for this North Korean horror show. North Korea is notorious for its extremely oppressive regime. Most of its people live inches close to famine. And if you say anything against those in charge, you can get executed on the spot or thrown into some of the most awful prisons on earth. One of these is Camp 22. According to an insider, Camp 22 is all too similar to a Nazi concentration camp. But North Korea, much like all communist countries, is highly secretive about its atrocities. The only reports come from the very few escapes and ex-prison guards who couldn't take the sight of daily torture anymore. 200,000 citizens have disappeared in North Korea. Many of these are thought to be sent to Camp 22. According to a former prisoner, most inmates would be either dead or disabled during their first 3 months at the camp. This is because they're tortured by the guards and subjected to unspeakable human experiments. It's quite literally a house of horrors. And here's where it gets even more brutal. Some are sent to Camp 22 and other prison camps as kids. Some are even born there. When a prisoner named Shin managed to escape and found political asylum in South Korea, he was surprised to find out there were other countries or a world outside of prison camps. He'd grown up believing everything was prison camps and labor for Kim Jong-il.
I didn't know, not at all, not until I escaped. I had no real feelings when I was a kid.
Shin was born in prison, the child of 2 prisoners that the guards forced to marry. He and the other children were beaten, sometimes bludgeoned to death, and starved repeatedly. When they would be sent to the mountains for hard labor, they were happy they could catch mice and worms to eat. Shin was the only one to escape Camp 14 after years of unspeakable torture. Sadly, the North Korean camps are just the mirror of a very troubled regime, where people are held in darkness both literally and metaphorically, starved and punished with death if they speak against the government.
He cuts his own population off from all information, but he himself has got television from all over the world.
In a country where horrific torture camps are kept so secret, who knows what else happens behind closed doors? Hey, thanks for watching. What prison do you think tops this list? Do you know of any other horrifying prisons around the world? Let me know in a comment, and before you leave, make sure you like, subscribe, and hit that bell button so you never miss a fresh episode. See you next time.